Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell of fury like a woman scorned. Dude, you ain't just whistling Dixie. I first came upon this story in October 1903. I wasn't there then. I promise I'm not a time traveler. We have a Miss May Catherine Wood working in the post office department in Washington, D.C. We have a U.S. Senator of New York by the name of Thomas C. Platt. She's now in New York wanting to bring about a breach of promise suit against the senator. What is that, you say? She's accusing him of promising to marry her and then reneging on that promise. With the lawyer in hand, she apparently has in her possession love letters from the senator. This is October. The past summer, she told her friend she was going to be married. She bought a trousseau, wedding clothes or whatever. But he's to marry someone else, a Lillian Janeway, in just a matter of days. Oh dear. So he's announced his nuptials to Lillian. May has returned from a trip to London, hence the suit when she found out the shenanigans were afoot. A reporter asked the senator about this, wanting to hear the scoop. The senator responded, quote, "Gentlemen, I am too much engaged to talk this evening. I learned from the post office department in Washington that Miss Wood has come here for the purpose of visiting a relative who is very ill. Farther than this deponent saith not. Signed T.C. Platt." Huh? I do love the fancy pants way they talked back then. So we're a couple of days later, this breach of promise suit of $25,000 has been dropped. It's assumed that it's probably been settled, the senator perhaps wanting to get this matter gone, and May, quote, denies that she planned to make trouble for her dear senator. Oh, hun. LOL. So Platt's marriage to Lillian has happened. Earlier than announced. By his words, in order to avoid the crush. I would say it was probably to avoid May. May's now kind of disappeared. You know how kids disappear and are quiet and you're like, oh crap, where are they? This can only be bad. Yeah. Now, I don't understand all of this, but a couple of years earlier, May was also the whistleblower of some sort of post office department scandal. She had a dispute with a guy named August W. Macon. He ticked her off. She blew things up. Not literally. Now, you need to know some things about May. She ain't just a regular gal. She's from Omaha, used to work in the newspapers, and she's a lawyer. Yep. She overheard some information exchange between Macon and some guy about a graft in government contracts. She told Macon later what she had heard, and she demanded some things, I'm assuming for her to keep it quiet. He refused. So what does she do? Having this information in hand, and also having been a stenographer for several of the men whose names had been dropped into the scandal, she went to the newspaper and said some stuff. Now, I'm not going to get into the scandal because that's not what the story was about, but I think where I'm going with this, May was not a pushover. When the scandal became public, these men said a lot of bad stuff about her, but it didn't hurt her in the least. She kept her job, maybe even had some more latitude with said job, and suffered no consequences. Do I admire her? Well, let's not pin ourselves to an opinion just yet. 1904 is quiet. The quiet before the storm, don't you know? February 8th, 1905. May's back in the news, retaining a lawyer, O'Flaherty and Bolton, to represent her in a suit she's bringing against, oh, you guessed it, Senator Platt. What is this about now? Oh, same old stuff, breach of promise, again. In addition to Platt, she wants to round up and file conspiracy suits against particular New York lawyers, maybe thrown in some government officials. Apparently her lawyers have the letters from Platt to her filled with sayings of love and evidence of gifts. Her lawyer, O'Flaherty, said, quote, when the trouble between Miss Wood and Senator Platt was first patched up, it was with the understanding that Miss Wood was to return to her position in the post office department, but following close upon the settlement, she was dismissed. I read that she had quit. I became acquainted with a Miss Wood in Washington many years ago. She was received into the best of society. At that time, it was known that Mr. Platt was paying her attention. She's an intelligent woman, is a graduate of law, and has traveled extensively. End quote. Remember when she did that you broke your promise thing 2 years ago and allegedly settled? Apparently, after the settlement, she quit her $1,000 per year job at the post office department, rented a suite of apartments at a hotel, and lived there for 6 months. Then she got herself into some financial woes and had her bills sent to the senator. The bills were refused to be paid, and she had to leave. Now, then it was said that her debts were paid. By her or by the senator? Don't know. From the Omaha Daily Bee, February 9th, 1905. Quote, Miss Wood's Washington career was interesting and varied. She came about 4 years ago and was detailed from the New York City post office. From the beginning, she talked freely of Senator Platt and stated that he had obtained her a position in New York and had manipulated her transfer. She received many letters from the senator and sometimes read them to her fellow clerks. She never hesitated to show presents which the New York statesman gave her. She spent money liberally and gave generous tips to messengers and acted like one for whom cash was plentiful. In the spring of 1903, she told her fellow clerks she was going to Europe to purchase her wedding trousseau, and after some 3 months' absence, returned with the fine raiment by the trunkful. End quote. But then here comes Platt and Lillian, their engagement announcement, and then their marriage. Well, it's April 30th, 1905. May is filing another suit, but against a William Loeb, President Theodore Roosevelt's secretary, General Wynne, who used to be Postmaster General, and J. Martin Miller, who she says all had destroyed some of the letters she had received from Platt. She wants $30,000 in damages. She says that the 3 men took the letters by force and threats and were to be the basis for a book she had written, the letters. Former Postmaster Wynne had detained her for 2 days at a house and by threat force took her letters. He was with 2 other men, one whom she said was named Hummel. The book was to be called The Love Letters of a Boss. Catchy. Note that Platt was 71 at the time. Apparently, this Miller was a detective who, with the other defendants, represented himself to May as an author and a publisher because he wanted to see her manuscript and he had a contract in hand. May was like, sure, that sounds great. Here's the manuscript. He got $25 from her to start the publication. She had gone to New York to read a proof of the book, and when she saw Miller, there was no proof. And by threat and intimidation, Miller told her to turn over the letters. She did so to this man named Hummel. Now, we haven't heard Loeb's name mentioned, so what does he have to do with it? I'll just let you know now. I don't know what he was alleged to have done, and he would say later he had nothing to do with any of it. May 1st, 1905. Petition for the above says, quote, that beginning about May 1st, 1903, plaintiff had prepared as a literary production and for publication a manuscript entitled The Love Letters of a Boss, which manuscript was largely made up from actual letters received by this plaintiff from a very prominent man in the U.S. Senate, Senator T.C. Platt, 71 years old and who pretended to be desperately in love with this plaintiff. That plaintiff had been engaged to marry said prominent elderly man and had received attentions from him which could only be excused on the ground of such engagement. That because of the conduct of said suitor, the said engagement was about to be canceled on April 15, 1903. End quote. May 16, 1905. The senator, Miss Wood declares, had frequently called for her in his carriage and taken her driving until, quote, another lady friend of his became awfully jealous. My own friends feared she would do something desperate and advised me to leave town, end quote. May continues, quote, several times to prevent a scandal, I had to leave my office when I knew she was coming. Platt himself pleaded with me to keep out of her way and usually warned me she was coming to see me, end quote. So Platt has said a particular letter was false. She replied, quote, why does he not sue me for forgery or have me arrested on that charge? I dare any of the crowd to get me into court on any pretext whatever. They will not get a chance to take any more of my papers. I am ready for them. Within reach of my hand day and night is a derringer. The next person who attempts to get my papers will surely find trouble. End quote. September 7th, 1905. She's filed a suit against Senator Platt and the U.S. Express Company for $25,000. This is on the grounds that she acted as his lawyer for Platt and the company when she was at the post office department. It was through info she gave him to the benefit of his company, aka she tipped him off, that they defeated the post-check bill that was before Congress in 1902. This act saved them allegedly hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's attaching the property of the company in Omaha and garnishing his salary as president of the company. September 9th, 1905. Supposedly, Platt is on his way to Omaha to see May, and she's on her way to New York to hold a discussion with him. Whoops! 2 ships passed in the night. While there, he could have faced the summons because she filed the suit in Omaha, but he decided, nah, she wasn't there, he's fleeing. Apparently, when it was found out he was in the area, the sheriff was going to attempt to serve him papers if they saw him. She allegedly told a friend before she left Omaha, quote, "While in California, I wrote Senator Platt telling him that unless he sought a personal interview with me within 60 days, I would make it warm for him." She doesn't mean warm in a cozy way. He has not sought the interview, and the suit I have just filed is only the beginning, end quote. September 22nd, 1905. Senator Platt is now in San Francisco after darting around the country to avoid May, allegedly. His condition, though, is pretty poor. He's not able to get around alone. He needs someone to lean on. On saying hello to General D. Stuart Gordon, quote, "Well, I am glad to see you. I am a pretty sick man, but I expect to regain my health shortly," end quote. October 10th, 1905. Platt's counsel has answered the suit petition of May, requiring that she provide more information to exactly what services she claims to have rendered for the company. How she secured information from the Post Office Department, how she secured a modification of the Postmaster's yearly report, all of which she claimed to have used to save the company a lot of money. E.P. Fitzwilliams, local manager in Omaha, took the stand and said that the senator owned none of the company's property in Omaha. Remember, she attached the property to her suit, but it ain't the senator's to give. October 19th, 1905, her suit has been dismissed because Platt doesn't own the property she's trying to garnish. November 4th, 1905, she's filed another suit against Platt, F.H. Platt, Robert J. Wynn, William Loeb, and J. Martin Miller for $150,000 for alleged wrongs while she was in New York, October 1903. Again, I'm assuming with the letters and her book manuscript. April 11th, 1906. So, yeah, the suit has been dismissed, that $150,000 one. Why? Because no one showed up for the plaintiff, aka May. Is she dead? Okay, no, she ain't dead. It's believed that he has done something to keep her from making an appearance. Another cha-ching settlement, perhaps. June 20th, 1906. Well, apparently, May's been out of the press too long. It's been a couple of months. What's happening now? Well, she had claimed before that they were affianced, hence the breach of promise suits. Well, she's taken it one step higher. She says she has a certificate of marriage to Platt. Allegedly, she's turned over the certificate to her attorneys, and it's believed now, with this in hand, she will demand a portion of his estate. Alimony, I guess, and an annulment. Platt denies the authenticity of this certificate. According to the alleged certificate, they were married by Edward W. Rice, Episcopal clergyman. A witness was J.V. Jones, who had some relation, perhaps work colleague or something, to Platt. So, of course, she purported that people threatened her and took her love letters. She said, quote, "I have kept quiet longer than I intended, but I have been ill for nearly 2 years. I have been persecuted. I was put through the 3rd degree by Abe Hummel, J. Frank Miller, and emissaries from the president," this would be President Teddy Roosevelt, "and from Platt in October 1903 in the Victoria Hotel and in Abe Hummel's office for the purpose of making me disgorge this marriage certificate and letters which indicate what happened in the Fifth Avenue Hotel late Saturday afternoon in November 1901. On the afternoon of November 9th, 1901, I received a special delivery note from Mr. Platt urging me to meet him at the hotel. I had been on friendly terms with Mr. Platt and kept the engagement." End quote. With this certificate, she's stating she was married to Platt before he had married Lillian, and she says she has letters asking her to go to Fifth Avenue Hotel on November 9th, 1901 for the wedding. She's never been divorced from him, which means that his marriage to Lillian is unlawful and that Platt is a bigamist. Presently, Platt is staying mum. I know you're asking questions. You should be. You got married in 1901. Then he married Lillian in 1903. Where was your marriage certificate then? Where was the accusation of bigamy then? Why were you suing for breach of promise when you were actually allegedly married? Yeah. August 23rd, 1906. May has now filed a suit for what? Who knows? In the Kalamazoo, great name, Circuit Court. She signed her name May Collier Platt. October 5th, 1906. May says, quote, Thomas C. Platt is reaping the reward of his old vicious career. I am his real wife, and I can prove it. He has recognized this other woman as his wife and has caused the world to recognize her as his wife. He is reaping a whirlwind and deserves no pity, end quote. Then she gets into saying stuff about Lillian, which I'm not going to bother with. November 15th, 1906. Platt and his wife have formally separated. No, not with May, with Lillian. I can't blame her. This whole thing with May, whether true or not, is just too much, I'm sure. Daniel Day Wolf Weaver of the law firm of Marsh, Winslow, and Weaver, who have represented Lillian, handed out for publication the following statement. Quote, owing to unhappy differences between them, the undersigned have this day executed a deed of separation. While making such announcement, we wish to assert with all possible emphasis the falsity of the scandalous articles which have lately appeared in the public prints. While there have been a series of differences and disputes which seem to make a separation advisable, there has been no conduct upon the part of either which would possibly be the foundation of divorce action. No question of the infidelity of either to the other has ever been raised. Statements which have charged violent and disgraceful scenes between us or other improprieties upon the part of either of us are absolutely false. Dated New York, November 12, 1906, signed T.C. Platt, Lillian T. Platt, end quote. February 27, 1907. Oh, hey, guess what? May's brought another suit against Platt. This time it's for divorce. She's named 16 women as co-respondents, one of whom is apparently Lillian. Quote, I instituted divorce proceedings on December 27th last, 1906, in New York against Senator Platt through my attorney, Mr. O'Flaherty. I have named 16 women as co-respondents. The trial will disclose crimes of various kinds, including robberies and perhaps attempted assassination, end quote. His response, quote, it is true that a suit of divorce has been filed. For the present, I do not care to discuss the case in the papers. I deny her allegations in every particular. They are as false can be, end quote. February 28, 1907, Mays apparently decided to tell everyone that Platt will resign from the Senate on March 1st, even though he said that he will stay through the end of his term in 1909. Okay. March 1st, 1907, her counsel has received Platt's response that he was married to Lillian, not to May, never to May. Platt, per her counsel, has offered to make a settlement if she keeps this out of court. However, she's like, yeah. Dispatch from New York. Quote, the evidence to be produced at the trial of the divorce suit will show that the oily Hummel, acting for May Wood, got $15,000 from Senator Platt for certain letters in Miss Wood's possession. He gave his client $8,000 and kept $7,000 for himself, according to the information of attorneys who have been investigating. Locked up in the Hummel safe, it is said there is an agreement signed by May Wood that in consideration of a certain sum paid to her, she agreed to turn over to Senator Platt all of his writings in her possession, end quote. March 3rd, 1907, the petition for divorce will be dismissed in New York. She will file one in Omaha, as this is still her legal home, though she hasn't lived there in years. October 1st, 1907, I don't know what the heck is going on, but we're back in New York where she's brought suit against him in the Supreme Court for divorce again. Allegedly, when he married Lillian, he bought off May with $10,000. John Stanchfield, on behalf of the senator, said, quote, Senator Platt was never married to Miss Wood, and therefore there was no ground for divorce. That will be the defense, and the case will be fought to the last court, end quote. October 5th, 1907. May has been ordered to furnish the documents, inspection of, and copy of she allegedly has. She is to bring the papers to the office of the clerk of the court and will remain in that office for Platt and his counsel to inspect. And they may make photographic copies of them. And if this can't be done, her counsel better have some good reasons as to why not. Platt denies all allegations that they were not married. Platt said, quote, "On the contrary, she has for several years been trying to extort money from me by various devices, including threats that she would sue me for breach of promised marriage," end quote. Platt continued, quote, "I believe and am advised by my counsel that I have conclusive grounds for believing that plaintiff intends to rely at the trial of this action upon a forged marriage certificate and upon a forged admission in writing dated December 10th, 1906. The alleged certificate is absolutely false and is a forgery. It purports to evidence a marriage which never occurred. The communication which plaintiff claims she has for me, dated December 1906, was not made by me, and if any such document exists, as plaintiff claims, it is a forgery," end quote. An alleged letter, quote, "Dear Catherine, it may be that I may not arrive at the hotel till 6 o'clock. You will occupy your room, 158, till I come and signal you that I am occupying next you. Dinner will be ready at 6:30 and we will be ready for it. I sent you a card by note to you this afternoon telling you that I expected you at 4 o'clock. Sincerely yours, P," end quote. May said, quote, "I kept the appointment made in this note from the senator. The room number 158 was in the Fifth Avenue Hotel and adjoined Platt's suite, which consisted of a parlor sleeping apartment and a bathroom numbered 159 and 160. We were married in my room Saturday evening, and I remained until the following Monday. It was the first time I ever stayed there. There was a secret door back the bookcase in Platt's parlor that opened into my room. I still have the wedding ring given me by Senator Platt, a band of 18-karat gold without inscription. I don't know where he bought it. I wish I did." The name of the minister who married us, as shown by the marriage certificate, was Edward W. Rice. I had never seen him before, nor have I ever seen him since. A few minutes after the marriage, someone mailed me a newspaper clipping in which it was stated that Edward W. Rice, a clergyman, had died in Mount Vernon. I recall that the minister who married us was in ordinary afternoon dress, including a frock coat and silk hat. The only witness to the marriage was a man brought there by Platt, who signed himself G.R. Jones on the marriage certificate. He also was a stranger to me, and I have never seen him since. He was a short, thick-set man about 35 or 40 years old and had the general appearance of the ordinary political hanger-on," end quote. May continued, quote, "I first went to call on Platt with a Mrs. Caulfield to see if he would get us positions as school teachers in the Philippines. He seemed to take a great fancy to me from the first. I consented to marry him 2 days before the ceremony was performed. He had asked me many times before, but I had always passed it off as a joke and refused to take him seriously," end quote. October 9th, 1907. Platt said, quote, "The alleged certificate is absolutely false and is a forgery. It purports to evidence a marriage which never occurred. The communication which plaintiff claims she has from me, dated December 10th, 1906, was not made by me, and if any document exists, as plaintiff claims, it is a rank forgery," end quote. Montgomery Advertiser, October 9th, 1907. Quote, "We have the old adage that there's no fool like an old fool, and if Tom Cat Platt, as he is sometimes called by the irreverent, entered into some sort of entangling alliance with the pretty actress through which she has a legal hold on him, he will be apt to find that the close of the game is less pleasant than the beginning seems to have been," end quote. October 10th, 1907, Platt says the alleged marriage certificate just happens to have been destroyed in the fact that the name of the man who officiated is missing. Everything else is all forgeries. October 12th, 1907, May has bought property in Colorado. She's going to build fine buildings and raise pedigreed cattle and horses. So while we're waiting, May wants a jury trial. Justice Seabury said no, because the only issue is whether or not she was married to Platt, and there is no authority for submitting an issue like that to the jury. November 13th, 1907, Platt's counsel says that the marriage certificate and letter asserting to the marriage are forgeries. They want them kept on file in the county clerk's office. They have filed an affidavit made by Platt that it's a forgery, he never married her, and that he could prove that the letter was created by May. Her counsel, of course, didn't want this. Judge is reserving the decision. January 15th, 1908, she has secured an order from the judge today that the senator has to turn over all letters and papers pertaining to the case so she can see them. March 26, 1908, J.F. McMahon, special agent of Platt, said, Quote, May Wood will have to make good in the New York courts in her suit for divorce against U.S. Senator Thomas C. Platt. She will be forced to prove all of her assertions in her bill, and unless she does, the senator will prosecute her for perjury. It is a plain case of blackmail, and the senator will not stand for any more persecution. I understand Miss Wood is in Colorado somewhere. The case has been postponed from time to time on her account, but the senator will not permit of any more delay. She will be forced to come into court and make her showing. We can prove that she has her wires badly crossed. Her bill alleges that she was married to the senator in 1901, but her former suit for breach of promise was brought in 1905. End quote. May 18, 1908, the New York Supreme Court trial has started. Senator is not expected to be present unless he has to be, as he is unable to walk. He is carried from his carriage to a wheeled chair when he has to be out and about. She testifies about the letters that she does have and ones she's tried to remember, but that were stolen from her. May 19, 1908, according to testimony, she read from her love letters. The only one she has that was an original, allegedly, was the least interesting one, according to the newspaper. The others were her recollections of what the missing letters probably said based on her memory. May 21st, 1908. So things have very quickly turned on their head. Justice O'Gorman said, quote, I cannot credit the plaintiff's evidence as to her marriage. The testimony impresses the court as a most wicked design to support a fictitious claim by forgery and perjury. I cannot believe from the evidence that there was ever a marriage. On the merits of the case, everything resolves itself against the plaintiff. Being impressed with the plaintiff's guilt of perjury, the court commits her to the city prison, there to be held until she provides bail of $5,000. End quote. Yeah, you heard that right. How did we get here? So no certificate was ever filed by a clergyman in the senator's apartments then at the Fifth Avenue Hotel. A letter that May had offered into evidence relating to his admitting their marriage was shown to the senator. Apparently at the request of two women, he had autographed a blank piece of paper. The letter in question was written on that blank piece of paper to make it appear to be a signed letter. He was questioned about all the places and times he was said to have been here or there, and categorically denied them. He was asked, though, if he had ever addressed her in endearing terms. Quote, I may have foolishly done so sometimes, end quote. He definitely never denied that they saw each other or that they exchanged letters. Quote, did you call her Katie, end quote? Her counsel, Mr. LeBarbier, asked. Quote, I called her Katie in my letters. I was very much pleased with her and liked her very much, end quote. Quote, did she call you by any pet name, end quote? He responded, quote, never in my life, end quote. Why did you like her? Because she was an agreeable woman. Why did you send Miss Wood to a certain room in the Fifth Avenue Hotel? I don't understand why I did it. I told her to await my signal because I was going to take dinner with her. He couldn't remember if they actually did have dinner together, but he did know they did not stay together that night. He denied knowing anything about the plot to get her letters from her through Miller, but did remember a Howe and Hummel letter regarding a case they were thinking about bringing against him. He gave his son, Frank, $10,000 to secure the return of certain letters for that case. So that letter that was faked using his autograph? An affidavit from a Mrs. Dunning was submitted to the court saying that she had gotten his autograph by sending an autograph book to his room. Then she gave the autograph to May, who was delighted. A deposition by a newspaper guy in Omaha, T.R. Portutt, was brought into evidence. He had done an interview with May. She told him she had been working at a publication in New York and was sent to interview the senator. They did the interview. He invited her to call if she wanted another. Later on, she wanted to be a teacher in the Philippines. Her and a woman friend, Caulfield, got appointments with the senator. The other woman made herself very disagreeable to the senator. Afterward, this woman, Miss Wood was quoted as saying, made herself so disagreeable that Senator Platt thought, quote, we would have to elope to escape her, end quote. May continued, but my sense of humor would not permit me to elope with a 70-year-old groom who I would have to support as he walked, end quote. Miss Wood added, quote, I could not afford to antagonize such powerful interests as Senator Platt, and was obliged to put up with him to a certain extent. I'd like to have anyone who thinks him a matrimonial prize to have been in my shoes for about one day." End quote. Pordat continued her quote, saying, "I was afraid the senator might beat me out by agreeing to fulfill his promise to marry me. And if there was one thing that would be more humiliating than suing this old man for breach of promise, it would be to be obliged to marry and live with him." End quote. May was not in court during Platt's testimony, but on the 21st, she asked to be her own lawyer for a few minutes. The justice said, "Yeah, you got lawyers, let them do their job." I'm paraphrasing what he said. She was a bit ticked. This was in regards to Senator Platt's son, Frank, being on the stand. Frank is also a lawyer. Quote, "Did you meet Mr. Hummel at Mr. Nichols' office in 1907? Asked Mr. Stanchfield. "I did." "Did Hummel say he had been retained by Miss Wood?" "He did." "Did he produce letters written by your father to Miss Wood?" "He showed some letters that were in the handwriting of my father and typewritten copies of others. He also had proofs of the story and photographic plates he said were from a Newark newspaper, negatives of original letters." Was the question of the amount of money to be paid discussed? That had been arranged beforehand with Mr. Nicol. "Did you pay $10,000 on that occasion?" "I gave $10,000 to Mr. Nicol and he gave it to Mr. Hummel." So Frank obtained the release and the two affidavits. Quote, "I wrapped the letters and affidavits and took them to my office. I read all the letters. Some were mutilated. I then sealed the package and locked it up. After a time, I opened the package, and with the exception of perhaps half a dozen I have produced here, I burned in the grate in my office." End quote. And he said, quote, "There was no suggestion of marriage in any of the letters." End quote. He was asked, "How many letters did you receive?" "I should say about 30 or 35. May 22, 1908. May faces indictment today by the grand jury on charges of forgery and perjury after her suit against the senator was thrown out by Justice Gorman. May is in the Tombs prison and is now claiming from her jail cell that the senator threatened her life. She said, quote, "This is all a put-up job of Platt. He has threatened me with just this thing for years, and I have called bluff. When I get out of here, I will take my case to a higher court, and as long as one member of Platt's family is alive, I will fight it to the bitter end. He threatened my life 4 years ago, if I ever dared to breathe a word of his marriage to me. He said he had many employees who would do anything for him and that he would have them hunt me down. I am not surprised on the whole that I am here, as it is only a part of Platt's plan. We tried, out of respect for his age, to leave out some of the strongest points of our case, but next time everything will be brought out. He is the big politician and has all the money. I haven't any. It means everything if I win. This outrage was prearranged when the Platts came to my home not so long ago and used all matters of threats to keep me from revealing the truth. Platt had to say what he did on the stand to keep from admitting that he was a bigamist. He lied from beginning to end." End quote. May 26, 1908. The last crushing blow to May Wood's case was the submission of proof that the marriage certificate, which she submitted as evidence, was actually not engraved until the February following the date of the alleged wedding. Apparently, the paper that it was on didn't even exist at the time of the wedding. Everyone was admittedly a bit shocked. Even Platt's lawyers were just prepared to ask for the case to be dismissed. By all appearances, no one was ready for justice to go the way he did. Dakota Chief, May 28, 1908, quote, "The two most important links in her chain, the marriage certificate and this confession, were made her own worst accusers when the defense finally displayed its hand. Months of patient detective work, weeks of microscopic study by handwriting experts, and day after day of testimony taken by deposition in various cities and states demolished the carefully built fabric of evidence Mrs. Wood had prepared. The marriage certificate was traced to the stationers who sold it, from them to the lithographers who printed it. It was shown conclusively that this certificate, purporting to have been drawn on November 9, 1901, was not printed until 1902. The other link in Mrs. Wood's chain, the confession in which Platt was made to acknowledge her as his wife, seemed to almost cry out for itself that it was an impudent fraud." End quote. Also, a handwriting expert had testified that in his opinion, the body of the letter in which Senator Platt was alleged to have admitted his relation as a husband to the plaintiff was added after the senator's signature had been affixed. D.A. Jerome said, quote, "It will be presented to the grand jury as speedily as possible, and if the woman is indicted, she will be placed on trial in the hope that her conviction will have a salutary effect and demonstrate such offenses cannot go unwhipped of justice," end quote. Whip it good. Mays said, quote, "I suppose I shall have to swallow any medicine they prescribe for me for the present, but you may say this for me. As long as I live and there is a Platt alive, I shall fight and fight hard for my rights," end quote. May 25th. She's been released on $5,000 bail. When the bail bond was made out, she signed it May C. Wood Platt. Quote, "Do you intend to plead guilty in event of an indictment being found against you?" she was asked. "I'll rot first," she shouted, the smile disappearing and her lips coming together in a straight, tight line. July 7th, 1908. True to her word, she pled not guilty. She's made a new bond of $5,000. She still insists she's married to Platt. December 16th, 1909. Senator is unable to appear in court, assuming because of continued health issues. Her trial for forgery and perjury will not take place in this current term. January 1910, still no trial. March 1910. The senator has passed away on March 6th at the age of 76 of what would later be said to be acute Bright's disease, which is now known as nephritis. He's had palsy of the legs for years when he needed to start getting around in a wheelchair. May wants to be recognized as his widow. Quote, "I shall go to New York immediately and make a personal demand on his son that I be placed in possession of Mr. Platt's affairs until the will is read. But I don't expect Frank Platt to let me get in control. I will make the formal demand as a foundation for the legal fight which I expect to have put up in order to get my rights. I am absolutely sure that somewhere in Mr. Platt's private papers will be found proofs that I was legally married to him," end quote. March 10th, 1910. Quote, "There is no alternative in my mind but for me to be persistent and press my claim against the Platt estate, if there is any estate. Some years ago, Platt declared he would hound me off the face of the earth. These are his exact words. Never at any time since the day of his threat has he relented in his efforts to persecute me. Even here in Colorado, where express companies in which he was almost the controlling figure are most powerful, certain men in his pay came to the little town of Julesburg to circulate malicious, slanderous statements, to attack my character and malign me. He even engaged local politicians in his efforts to injure me. All of these tools, I know, though, believe their efforts to have been hidden. The Platts have spent altogether $150,000 in their efforts to discredit me. The trouble was the Platts made the mistake in the first place by not coming to me personally. Instead, they relied on their enemies, Mr. Loeb, former secretary to President Roosevelt, and others, with the result that instead of keeping me still, they have forced every revelation that has been made. The work of Senator Platt's tools simply was botched. I have a typewritten statement over the signature of Senator Platt with numerous other documents as proof positive of our marriage. He claimed always that the typewriting was filled in after the name was signed by him. That was the weakest excuse he could have offered, for how does he explain my marriage certificate, issued in New York and bearing the date of November 9th, 1901? March 27, 1910. She's still talking about contesting the estate after the will had been filed in New York. The estate was granted to his 3 sons with no mention of her. Her reasoning of this, quote, "The estate amounts to little anyway," end quote. And that's where this story ends. I couldn't find any mention of her and him any further with regards to this anyway. So what are your thoughts? I normally sympathize with the women in this era because their rights were little, but I find it hard to be sympathetic to her for some reason. I find some things odd, like why did she take 5 years to decide to contest the marriage? That doesn't make any sense to me. When he married Lillian 2 years after he married you, boom chakalaka, bring out your marriage certificate. But no, she sat on it for 5 years post-nuptials and instead sued him for breach of promise first, which is aka breaking the engagement, more than once. Does that mean she lied? I don't know, but I'm suspicious. But yes, we know that politicians can and have done whatever they needed to do to save face. But this still rubs me the wrong way with her. Take home message? Don't leave your house. Don't meet any people. Don't go on any dates. Wear sunglasses if you do have to go out so you don't make eye contact. These stories are becoming just pure advice to never talk to anyone or go anywhere. because you might get sued or married or divorced or murdered. So what's on the docket for next week? I don't know, but I need to get some slightly shorter stories. I'm starting to get carpal tunnel syndrome. See you.